Business correspondent JBLYNAM about what they had to say on that. It's quite impenetrable, some of this, Joe, but the issue that was so central and so problematic was this question of private sector involvement, the voluntary issue. Yeah,
Berlin wants the banks to take some sort of haircut, that they will have some sort of discount on the investments that they have. And they said that that should happen when the new phase of any second Greek bailout kicks in, and that private sector banks would have to lose money. Now, the ECB are dead set against that, and France have spoken that they support the ECB in that stance. What they appear to be doing now is, of course, fudging the issue. And they're talking about a voluntary rollover of debt. That means that banks wouldn't be obliged to do so, would do so in the full knowledge of what's happening. The reason they're talking about voluntary is because that might avoid what's called a credit event. A credit event is basically a default.
A euphemism.
It's a nice way of saying a default. A credit event would then have very dangerous concentric circles for Portugal, for Ireland, and the entire Eurozone. And there's talk about if Greek banks collapsed, that it would seriously damage the ECB itself. So the ECB are dead set against any form of default or credit event. So now they're talking about a voluntary rollover. This is kind of based on the idea it's called the Vienna initiative. It had happened in 2008 for many Eastern European countries, whereby the debt was simply rolled over and kind of the money was paid back in full and then reinvested in that particular country, Hungary and Ukraine, etc. They're talking about something like that for Greece, and a voluntary agreement would avoid, in the eyes of at least France and Germany, a credit event and spark a future thing. But they're saying we don't have time to lose, but it doesn't look as if it's going to happen until September at the very earliest.
And when they say a voluntary event, is that like saying I need 10 recruits to go over the top, you're voluntary? I mean, do they have any option in that?
This is a very interesting point. S&P, the Standard & Poor's and Moody's and Fitch, these are the credit rating agencies, they say, well, how voluntary is a voluntary rollover? In the sense, are banks press-ganged into rolling over their debts by their sovereign governments? France is by far the largest exposee when it comes to Greek debt. So will Paris now say, right, BNP Paribas, SocGen, are you now obliged to roll over your debt? S&P and the other agencies said, well, if we think that it's not, if we think it's anything less than voluntary, it will, we will classify it as a credit event.
Fascinating stuff. Thanks, Joe.